Jordan and Gretzky, Serena and Ruth. Remembering great ones is easy to do.
But what about the no-names who spent their whole lives long-snapping footballs and catching sack flies? They're guys. Remember that guy. Remember that guy. Remember that guy. Remember that guy. Remember that guy.
They're just gonna remember some guys now.
Ground ball, Brito backhands to first, and the Norman conquest is complete with the historic four-peat for Remember That Guy, the show where we mine our memories for nuggets of nostalgia about peripheral players, past and present. Hey there, folks. I'm one of your hosts, James, and I, too, come screaming down the plains.
Going back-to-back with back-to-backs. Diaz back with you once again. We have a very special guest. He is perhaps the only person in America that can stop the Boomer Sooner reign of terror. Please introduce yourself.
Don't say that. Everyone who listens to this podcast knows that I love the Oklahoma softball. This is my third year talking about them. They were my making memories for this week, and James beat me to the punch.
I got nothing more to say. Please, I've made a segue for you.
I read the other day that Oklahoma's seniors will have won 4 titles with an average yearly record of 59-6 or something like that. That's just ridiculous.
How many total games did a senior lose? Are we talking 25 or so?
No. So actually, it might be even better. It might be only 15 if I'm looking correctly. I think the article I looked at undersold them. 56-4, 59-3, 61-1, 59-7. Imagine being 59-7 and winning
15 regular season.
Winning the Women's College World Series. And that's the worst year you had in 4 years.
The standard is the standard.
And unfortunately, the SEC gets them next year, which sucks because they're going to talk about that forever. And it's only going to be SEC baseball and SEC softball, and everyone else can just kind of ignore those sports for all of college, which is very sad.
Don't you dare ignore my Purple Eagles. Don't you dare.
How did Niagara do, Diaz?
So they got whooped by Oklahoma State in Game 1. In Game 2, they fought. It was a close game in Game 2, but they did lose.
Did they play a full 18 innings of ball?
So I learned actually that there is no run rule.
Okay.
Yeah, because they lost 18-7 to Oklahoma State.
That's not. But, you know what? It's only barely double digits.
Right, and you put up 7 runs.
Yeah.
If you had better pitching, you could have theoretically had a chance.
Well, anything else other than the Boomer Sooner Nation?
Yeah, real quick, I just want to give a shout out to Vinny Jr. For those who don't know, Vinicius is one of the best players in the world. Just won another Champions League with Real Madrid. He's going to win something with Brazil, probably the Copa America in a couple weeks. And he's one of the favorites for the Ballon d'Or. And if you didn't know, racism is a big issue in the world, especially in Spain, unfortunately. And Vinny has been the victim of racist abuse many times. One that's been going on for a while was where he was a victim of racial abuse in a game against Valencia last year. And just today, 3 Valencia fans were found guilty of crimes against moral integrity, aggravated by racially motivated discrimination under Spain's criminal code, which is the first time ever someone has been criminally prosecuted for racial abuse at a soccer match in Spain. It's insane that it took this long to happen, but I'm glad that it finally has happened, and maybe now that people are going to get prison sentences for being racists, it might curb at least some of that. But one of the things that I really want to talk about was Vinny put out a statement, and this is in Portuguese, so the English translation has come up with 2 different phrases for it. But and this is the line that everyone has been talking about. I'm not a victim of racism. I'm a tormentor of racists, which I think is very good. A different translation said I'm an executioner of racists,
Also a
which
bar.
was also really good. So, it said, let the other races be afraid, ashamed, and hide in the shadows. Otherwise, I'll be here to call them out. So good on Vinny. Good on Spain for finally taking steps to deal with the racist issues they have. Just a little positive after a very long and drawn out, negative saga.
Glad to know that there's a resolution there at the very least, and sure would love to import laws that treat racism seriously. That'd be cool. But enough about that. Anything for you, Diaz?
Yeah, so I've mentioned this on our Discord, but I want to at least formally eulogize in audio form the Birmingham Southern baseball program. I don't want to eulogize Birmingham Southern University. I'm not sure of what things led to that university having to cease operations. I believe it was May 31st.
My understanding, what little I can contribute, is it was exclusively financial. Just no money.
No money, but you need money to teach people things. We all know how it goes. But while the university had closed its doors, the baseball team still had unfinished business. And with no home to go back to, their backs against the wall, they were down 4-0 and facing elimination at the Division III College World Series. And they scrapped all the way back to 7-7. They hit a walk-off 2-run homer to advance. It was an incredible video. If you haven't seen it, look it up. But their season did unfortunately come to an end in that next game. They were on the losing end of a walk-off home run. And I mean, that's everything that we love about baseball. What you can do can happen against you in the very next game. But primarily, I just wanted to acknowledge in audio form that team did happen. It did exist. The university may no longer, but the memories formed by all of the guys on those teams shall reign forever. Go Birmingham Southern, whatever your mascot used to be, because you don't have one anymore.
We can remain with D3 baseball for one split second. I think we should mention the team that eventually went on to win, because in the finals, it was like this D3 powerhouse that has twice the enrollment of most of the teams that had made the tournament. Wisconsin Whitewater, they're just slaughtering people all the time.
They win everything. When I did D3 track, it was half the champions were Wisconsin Whitewater, Wisconsin Whiter, Wisconsin Oshkosh. Wisconsin Whitewater.
It's just about being that biggest state university in that system, but they faced Misericordia. And I know very little about the Misericordia baseball program, but I know one thing, and it's the one thing they're very good at, and it's getting hit by pitches. They're the single most hit by pitch team in college baseball history for a couple years now, and that has seemingly now paid off with the World Series. So very, very proud of them for just getting plunked all the way to a title.
Take several for the team, not just one. Some people only take one. If you take several, just might work out.
But speaking of championships, we are currently in the midst of the Stanley Cup Finals. Got Game 2 coming up after the Cats stole Game 1 with a really nice Sergei Bobrovsky shutout. I can't guarantee even if the Stanley Cup Finals are still going on by the time this comes out. We don't know. We're recording this very early. I can guarantee, though, that the highlight of the series, for me at least, has already happened. Everyone who listens to the show probably at this point knows that we're pretty big fans of Animal Planet.
Crocky.
And so is TV producer Michael Levitt. And ahead of Game 1, Michael Levitt shared with us his new brainchild. You've been able to see this now on ESPN+, NHL Network, Sportsnet up in Canada, is the first ever edition of the Stanley Pup.
Okay.
Not shockingly, it's inspired by the Puppy Bowl. Hey guys, how old do you think the Puppy Bowl is?
25 years.
25 years, Diaz?
Right about that. Do I prices right this? I'll go 24.
Well, you both bust out because it's 20. It is 20. It started with Super Bowl 39, Eagles Patriots, and it has been going for now 20 years. And it normally involves 50 puppies that just get filmed for 50-ish to 90 hours for some of them, and they just cobble all that raw footage together. This was a little bit different. I don't have a figure in total hours, but the Stanley Pup, which came around, had 16 dogs specifically, one for each of the playoff teams. And of course, they all have dog pun names. Xavier, I don't think I can surprise you with the Rangers one.
I did not look it up.
Okay. Do you have a guess? Do you have a guess for what the Rangers one is?
Is it Bark Messier?
But no, so it's all active players. It's all
all
players
active
that
players.
made the playoffs with the team this year.
Okay. That's hard.
This is a tough one. Are you ready for it? Adam Foxhound.
Okay. I was thinking something with Kreider.
Shih Tzu Sturkin would have been my guess.
From the Canucks, we have Quinn Hughes. The finals matchup is, of course, right now between Edmonton's Connor McDoodle and Florida's Sergei Bobrovsky. And last just a couple ones that I want to share that I enjoyed. Washington is represented by Alexander Ovechkin. Tampa Bay is represented by Nikita Kucherov. And the LA Kings, I hate this. I hate that I got to give it to them, but I do really enjoy Anze Kopitar. So that is your 2024 Stanley Pup. Hopefully that will live on just as long as the Puppy Bowl has, and we will get to enjoy that year in and year out. But that and D3 baseball along with Diaz are what's making memories for me right now. However, Xavier, it is not I, but you that must begin the main proceedings because you are on a bit of a heater right now. You've got us again this week. I know you got some assistance from the wisdom of the crowd in getting this category together, but why don't you introduce your category nonetheless?
Actually, I want Diaz to introduce this category. I don't want to claim credit. This is a collaborative show. I want to make sure that I do his idea justice. And what better way than just have him do it?
Sure, I can say some words. So the words that I want to say are, when we look at the way that sports are played, there's certain types of guys that pop up on the field, right? Like there's the deep threat wide receiver. There's the big guy that just mashes home runs. There's the elite 3-point shooter in basketball, the deep threat. And for all of these kind of things to develop, there has to be a first. There's the first one that's like, what if I'm just a big guy that just hits the shit out of a baseball? And that's how we get Babe Ruth. Obviously, Babe Ruth is a bit too good to guy, but it might be a little
borderline case. Borderline.
Which side of the Babe Didrik Zaharias line is the Babe on?
The last thing I want to say about Babe Ruth, I feel like you could try and induct him exclusively as a pitcher. You could try and make a case for Babe Ruth in parentheses pitcher.
You could. I think there's a close argument there, but along those kind of lines, we have all these archetypes in sports. And so there has to be a founder. So this week we want to discuss archetype founders.
Thanks, Diaz. It's good to have you describe the thing that you picked and me not butcher it. But with that being said, can either of you tell me what a false nine is?
False nine, to me, is what somebody who wants to sound smart about when they're talking about soccer, just like, oh yeah, that's a false nine. And I couldn't tell you what it actually is, but that's my understanding of what the false nine is.
It's like a guy that's playing out of position. It's like a way of structuring. I've thrown a dart at the wall. But some way where you were aligning someone in a sneaky way.
So a false nine is essentially a midfielder or playmaker who gets put as the central striker or the pseudo central striker in an attacking lineup. So normally most lineups will have your defenders, your midfielders, your forwards, you'll have wingers, and then a striker who plays the furthest forward. It could be a target man, someone like Olivier Giroud, 6'4", 6'5". Their job is to, get on the end of crosses and nod home with aerial ability. You can have someone who maybe is better at link-up play. They're still the furthest forward, but they do a lot of dribbling and passing. Someone like Diaz's star, Alexander Isak, who is also 6'5", but he's just not really a header at this point. He could be in the future. But a false nine is when you don't have a player like that. You don't have a big, strong center forward. So instead, you put a midfielder up as your furthest forward, but instead of him playing like that, he drops in deep to kind of facilitate play. So he ends up playing more like an extra midfielder and letting like the wingers run off of him. He's not there to score goals, really. He's there to essentially get assists for everyone else. The thing about false nines is a lot of times they're an invention of necessity, where if you don't have an Erling Haaland, Pep Guardiola is very famous for using Lionel Messi as the false nine, and a lot of his City players as false nines until they got Haaland. But the false nine has been around for a while. You know, it's been used pretty sparingly throughout history. The mighty Magyars of Hungary in 1950s used it. Johan Cruyff, when he was with Ajax in the Netherlands with Total Football, also used the false nine. And Luciano Spalletti of Roma made Francesco Totti his false nine in the mid-2000s. It's a lot more common now. Really took off with Spain when they went back to back to back, winning the Euros, World Cup and Euros. They used Cesc Fabregas as a false nine, which is ridiculous because I love Cesc. He is like the most deep-lying playmaker you could think of. Not a big guy. But today I want to talk about the guy who brought the concept of the false nine to life in the European game, and that was the paper man, Matthias Sindelar. James?
Paperman, I assume, along the lines of Karl Malone Mailman?
No. Paperman, as in...
Paper boy who has been mitzvahed is now a paper man.
So in German, it's like der Papieren or something like that. I do not speak German. But he's the paper man because he never grows taller than 5'9", and he's really skinny and thin. He is like a piece of paper. So not Karl Malone coded in any way.
Good. Paper Mario
yes.
1000-Year Door coded instead.
Yes, pretty much. Of Czech descent, Sindelar was born Matthias Sindelar in Kozlov, Moravia, which is now part of the Czech Republic, then part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. His father, Jan, was a blacksmith, and Jan moved the family to Vienna in 1905 when Matthias was a young child. They Germanized their names when they went to Vienna, and that's how Matej became Matthias. And he began, playing soccer in the streets with all the other kids in, this working class neighborhood of Vienna. His father dies when he's 14, so he takes up a job as a locksmith, but his family needs more money, so he's also part-time selling sporting goods to the people of Vienna. Eventually, he ends up being scouted by Hertha Vienna, who signed him for the youth teams when he's 15 years old. He gets fast-tracked to their first team, and he's playing first-team soccer as a teenager. So, because he is very, very thin. Like, he's not short but stocky. He's short and very thin. So, the way that he compensated was just by being more evasive and being able to maneuver better than everyone else. He said he developed the ability to, quote, dodge and dribble at will against his opponents and to squeeze with disconcerting ease through gaps in the opposing defenses. So you think about when the refs in the NFL game used the piece of paper to decide if it was a first down. That's the thing. He could squeeze through gaps like that. That's why he's the paper man. He did pretty well for Hertha, but he does have a really bad knee injury when he's 20. And at the same time, Hertha has a really bad economic crisis. So they just kind of collapse and get rid of most of their players and staff. He's a free agent now, 20 years old, but he's still injured. So he talks to a doctor of another club, SV Amateur, and the doctor says you should get meniscus surgery. At this time, that's an extremely risky and dangerous surgery. It has not been done that often. But if you ever really want to play again, you're going to have to try it. So he does. Thankfully, it's successful. He recovers. And the next year, he signs with SV Amateur. 2 years later, they become a professional club and take on the name Austria Vienna. And Austria Vienna become one of the best clubs in all of Austria. Over the next 11 years, they win 2 different league titles, 5 different Austrian Cups, and he's leading the line the whole time. Despite his small frame, they have him up top. They say his greatest strength at this point was his ankle breaking agility. So he's getting the ball, breaking ankles, then playing in other players to score. And his club career is great, but what he's really known for is his performance with the Austrian national team at a time that became, pretty much their golden generation. He scores in his debut on September 28, 1926, a win against Czechoslovakia, place that he was technically born in. And then he scores 3 more goals in his next 2 international matches. But he has a falling out with coach Hugo Meisel, who then leaves him out of the national team for the better part of 4 years. This doesn't really go well for Austria, and early 1931, after a loss in the opening match of the Central European Cup, which was like a 5-team round-robin tournament between Italy, Switzerland, Austria, Hungary, and I think Czechoslovakia was the other one, there's a lot of public pressure on the coach to recall Sindelar. And by public pressure, I mean a bunch of Austrian soccer luminaries cornered the coach at the Ring Cafe in Vienna and refused to leave until he agreed to call Sindelar back up. They literally DeAndre Jordan this guy to force him to call up Sindelar. So he does. And he installs Sindelar as the false 9 in a 2-3-5 formation, which is ridiculous to think about now because there's no way it could ever work in current soccer. But it is very funny to think, we had 2 defenders, 3 midfielders, and 5 attackers, but all our attackers were essentially also midfielders, so it was like a 2-8.
So at this point, he's not like a center amongst a bunch of sharpshooters that he's feeding. He's a center amongst other guys with not particularly flashy skills, but he's just the best distributor.
Well, I'm not going to say that there are scorers on this team. Like, Austria has some really good players, but Sindelar definitely makes them look better.
In the 1930s, as I've heard.
Yes. His first game back with the national team is a 5-0 demolition of Scotland, who were one of the best teams in all of Europe at the time. They would not lose for 19 more games. In the first 3 games back, they win by a combined 16-0 over both Scotland and Germany twice, one in Vienna, one in Berlin. In October of 1932, they beat Switzerland to win the Central European International Cup. So they lost that first game, then they don't lose another one for the rest of the tournament and win the title. In December 1932, the Austrian team, now dubbed the Wunder Team, play England at Stamford Bridge, which is wild to think that Stamford Bridge was still around 100 years ago. And they dominate England. They're the first team to score more than 1 goal ever at England. But England gets some ridiculously lucky bounces and win 4-3, despite being totally outplayed. Like, all of the English papers were like, England did not deserve anything. English team lucky to win, said the Manchester Guardian. There could not be the slightest doubt that an Austrian team were the superiors. It was victory and no more, said the Times.
Let us be fair. While the modern twist of it certainly has some racism to it, nobody loves shitting on the English football team more than the English press. Historically, let's be fair.
That is true, but at this point, they were still the ones who invented this game and were like, no, we're still better than everyone else, and they weren't used to seeing them really get outplayed. But enough about that. They go into the 1934 World Cup as, one of the, they're not the favorite, but they are a strong contender. And the World Cup was a little different at this point because for the next couple of tournaments, it was a straight knockout tournament. No group stages whatsoever. They just randomly drew you into 8 matchups of 2 in the tournament bracket. Austria start off very strong. They beat France in the first round with Sindelar scoring. They then beat Hungary in the quarterfinals. And then in the semifinals, they get Italy. The Italians kind of just beat the shit out of Austria, physically. They win 1-0, and there was retrospectively a lot of concern about the fairness of this tournament, because this was held in 1934 Italy under the watchful eye of Benito Mussolini, and Italy wins this tournament with a lot of very sketchy refereeing decisions. So they go out in the semifinals, but they might have been cheated by the fascists. We don't know, but still, they look really good. They got plenty of other opportunities to win stuff. And now we move to the 1938 World Cup. Austria is pretty much the favorite this time. And not only are they great, there's also a really weak field. Because FIFA decides to have a second consecutive World Cup in Europe, this time in France. And so almost all of the Central and South American teams, all of the Americas essentially decide to boycott because they're pissed that they didn't continue alternating it with South America. So Uruguay, Argentina, USA, Mexico all decide not to participate. Spain can't participate because they're having a civil war right now. So the field gets filled out with teams like Indonesia, back when they were the Dutch East Indies national team, and Cuba.
Fascists had a lot of effect on this, is what I'm finding out. This World Cup was greatly influenced by fascism.
James, there's more to come.
Is there? Is something going to happen in Austria in the next couple of years?
Well, in the next couple months, before the World Cup starts, the Anschluss happens, and Nazi Germany demanded that Austria be absorbed into their own national team. And say, you're not allowed to participate in the World Cup because you're just part of Germany. Which is brutal because, this was Austria's real, best chance to win. In a funny turn of events, Germany does then lose in the first round to Switzerland. So they still look like douchebags. But in April of 1938, the Austrian team plays Germany in a friendly in the Prater Stadium in Vienna. This match that's dubbed the Anschlussspiel in Germany, or the Anschluss game, was planned as a celebration by the Nazi regime of the Anschluss and, quote, Austria's coming home to the Reich.
Yeah, it feels like there's some quotations around that friendly.
Yes. The Nazi propagandists ordered that this is going to be a draw. Everyone's going to go home happy, 0-0 or 1-1. Don't fuck around. But as you know from me talking about this earlier, the Austrian team is way, way, way better than the German team. So the entire first half is them going in on goal and then just kind of kicking it wide because they don't want to die. But then in the last 20 minutes, Sindelar says fuck it and scores a goal and runs and celebrates in front of the Nazi director's box, dances in front of them, which may not have been the best thing to do. He was also the reason why Austria was able to wear Austrian colors for that game. Because Germany was trying to get rid of the Austrian flag, they didn't want Austria to wear red and white. And Sindelar's like, no, we're wearing red and white. And because he was so good, the Nazis said, okay, fine, but no more after this. So he gets this one last game in Austria and then scores against the Nazis and then dances in front of them in a very mocking gesture. After this game, Nazi Germany tries to call him up for the World Cup, and he says no. He couches it by saying, I'm old and injured, I can't play anymore, despite having just played a month beforehand in this friendly. And at this point, the Nazis essentially disband the Austrian Football Federation because they're absorbing it into Germany, and they purge a lot of staff and players of teams, especially Austria Vienna, because it had a really large Jewish fan base at the time. So Sindelar never plays again after the Anschlussspiel. That is his last game. He chooses to retire rather than play for the Nazis. And in August of 1938, he buys a cafe in Vienna. Essentially, the Nazis were forcing out any Jewish business owners, and they were trying to make them sell for nothing. But Sindelar gave the dude full market price and then continued to have Jewish customers in the cafe and refused to put up Nazi posters as ordered by the Nazi party. And then on January 23rd, 1939, both Sindelar and his girlfriend were found dead at the apartment they lived in Vienna, which you probably could have expected if you keep telling the Nazis no. The police ruled that they died of carbon monoxide poisoning, air quotes. The public prosecutor was still investigating 6 months later when the Nazis said, shut this case down or else. Technically, we don't know for sure what happened, but there are three possibilities, and I'll let our listeners draw their own conclusions. So the official line is that the death was accidental, caused by a defective chimney Allegedly, a neighbor had reported defective chimney in the block a few days before the death. And things like this did happen in the early to mid 1900s with very poor building code. So that's the official line. One of the other possibilities is that Austrian writer Friedrich Thorberg wrote a poem called Auf den Tod ein Fußballspielers, which is on the death of a footballer, where he suggests that Sindelar had actually committed suicide because he was so distraught about what was happening to Austria. And then the last is that he gets killed by the Gestapo. It's as much of a fact as you can find in these old things, is that the Gestapo had a file on him with all the things that he had said and done, and were surveilling his cafe. There were also rumors that he was Jewish. Contemporary sources say that he definitely was Catholic, but he grew up in a predominantly Jewish part of Vienna and had a lot of Jewish friends and acquaintances. So a lot of reasons why the Nazis might not have liked him. In the 2000s, there was a documentary on the BBC about him where a old friend had said that a local official was bribed to record his death as an accident to ensure he would receive a state funeral. Quote, according to the Nazi rules, a person who had been murdered or who has committed suicide cannot be given a grave of honor. So we had to do something to ensure that the criminal element involved in his death was removed.
If you get murdered, you can't be put in a grave of honor?
I guess that is what they said in this documentary.
I understand, like, I guess criminals get murdered more, but that still seems like a big ol' oversight.
A bit of victim blaming there, it sounds like.
How dare you let yourself get murdered?
Regardless of what the real manner of his death was, more than 20,000 people did attend his funeral, an occasion that was described by writer Robin Stummer as Vienna's first and last rally against the Nazis, which kind of sad when you think about everything else. And, Sindelar had a very interesting life, but this is about archetypes, and his style of play is the thing that I want to really end on. Alfred Polgar once said, in a way, he had brains in his legs, and many remarkable and unexpected things occurred to them while they were running. Sindelar's shot hit the back of the net like the perfect punchline, the ending that made it possible to understand and appreciate the perfect composition of the story, the crowning of which it represented. And that is why they called him the Mozart of football. And I like false nines because I like total football. My first really foray into watching soccer was at the turn of the 2010s, watching all the tiki-taka of the Spanish national team and Barcelona, and the way Arsene Wenger played with Arsenal. So I have a soft spot for false nines, and I just wanted to make sure that we have a chance to at least talk about the original false nine, Matthias Sindelar.
Is he still a false nine if he's the OG? Is he like the one real nine? I know
he's a false nine. I also saw someone call him the false nine, Nein, which I thought was pretty good.
That's clever.
But yeah, big fan of Sindelar in the false nine. But Diaz, this was your category, really, so I think it's only fair that you go next. Please tell me the banger story that you have.
All right, yeah, so I'll go second, and, I came up with this category in part because just today, as we record, I have begun training for my second marathon. The levels of separation within the marathon world are incredible to think about. So, I trained my ass off, and I was very proud to clock in just under 4 hours in Marathon 1. If I wanted to qualify for Boston, I would have to shave an entire hour off of that time. I would have to get under the 3-hour mark to be able to qualify. Then consider that the world record is another hour off of that. So, there's a bell curve within the marathon world, and it gets just increasingly and increasingly more difficult and more insane to consider that when you qualify for Boston, you're already considered an elite runner.
Yeah.
And an elite is an hour slower than the world record.
Like, people, listen to podcasts at 1.5 speed and stuff. There are people that can literally do that to what is one of the most physically strenuous things you've ever accomplished. 2 times speed.
Literally 2 times speed. It's very humbling. It's very humbling to consider that. And while the marathon as a race obviously goes back to, I don't remember the guy's name, but there's that guy that ran between 2 places in old Greece to report that they'd won a war.
I think you know the name of one of those 2 places, Diaz.
One of them's Athens, right?
Okay, so you picked the harder one. The other one's marathon.
There you go. And what they roughly, and like the guy again, we should look up what this guy's name was. He like ran this distance and died.
Phidippides, isn't it?
Phidippides, yes.
Yeah.
It was Phidippides who ran that distance to report good news and then died once he got there. But his memory was honored by this marathon race, which, while the marathon as a race to compete in, the concept of that had existed since 1896. The first time that the official distance of 42,195 meters was established was at the 1908 London Olympics, meaning that when Johnny Evans won gold at that first race, he set the first world record in the marathon at 2 hours and 55 minutes. Within that first year, the record is broken a few times by different U.S. runners. It's then claimed by some runners from Britain. It remains mostly a race of the West until 1935. Song Ki-chun of Korea sets the world record at 2 hours and 26 minutes, 14 seconds.
Didn't know Korea was going to make an appearance.
And we're already, think about this. This is about 27 years. We've already taken about a half hour off of that world record, making some incredible progress. But the archetype of the marathon runner is not an American. It is not a Korean. It is an East African runner who is used to running in this high altitude and then all of a sudden says, wait, I get double oxygen? Bet. Let's start running. So with that now being our modern understanding of the best way to train is at elevation. The best runners come from these places where they are used to living even day-to-day life on lesser oxygen and then getting that boost on race day. There had to be a first one to do that. So today we're going to talk about Abebe Bikila.
I can honestly say I've not heard that person before, which is good because this is now 2 people that I've learned about that I did not know of this episode.
We'll see if James can make it 3 for 3.
I'm almost certain.
But for now, we'll focus on Abebe Bikila. He was born August 7th, 1932 in Jato, Ethiopia, which coincidentally was the same day that the 1932 Olympic Marathon was run in Los Angeles. That one was won by Juan Carlos Zabala of Argentina. 1935, he's 3 years old, and while we're going to circle back to what Xavier was talking about a little bit, which is fascism, but this time we're going to go with the Italian version of it. It is Italy making their second war of aggression in Ethiopia to try to claim this territory. And because of this, Abebe is forced to flee with his family to a more remote part of Ethiopia. Eventually, things calm down enough that they are able to return to their original village, but the country is under full Italian rule at this point. It is
Benito Mussolini fucking things up for 2 out of 2 guys so far today. What the hell?
He simply must be stopped. And, thankfully, World War II had that successful effect of telling Benito Mussolini to fuck off.
Turning his world upside down.
Flip it all upside down. One of the consequences of this is that Ethiopia does regain its independence. So after a brief time, Ethiopia, once again, an independent nation. And while all of this is going on, Abebe is still trying to just live the life of a normal child. The one sport that he plays a lot is Gena, which is a form of field hockey, which is played on a much larger field. You can kind of think of Geba is to modern field hockey what the original lacrosse is to modern lacrosse, where you had the idea of this game. There were no defined boundaries. There's no real limits on how many members of a team you have. It's just a big old space. People are running around. There's a ball. They're trying to get it into a goal. The game of Gena is no longer played very often in Ethiopia, but it is still an important part of the Ethiopian Christmas celebrations. One of those traditions, so it still lives on. That's kind of the basis for his initial cardio training, just playing this game. Eventually, when he grows up, at the age of 20, Abebe enlists in the Ethiopian Imperial Guard. And as part of his personal training regimen, in addition to his military requirements, he runs about 12 miles a day through some steep hills. And he's doing it pretty fast, and fast enough that he catches the attention of the head trainer of the Imperial Guard, Omni Niskanen, who, that is, of course, a very European name. He is from Sweden, and he's just the head trainer that is in charge of the general fitness levels of everybody in the Imperial Guard. But Omni has a bit of a background in the marathon race. So he sees this potential talent, and he decides that he's going to start training Abebe for that marathon race. He starts training in 1955. By 1956, he is competing in the Ethiopian Armed Forces Championship, and he finishes second in the marathon there. But as still a relative newcomer to this sport, he has a lot of ways to go, and he continues his training. 1960, it's going to be a big year for Abebe. First, we need to acknowledge cultural norms. Things are different over there. This was an arranged marriage. At the age of 27, he does marry a 15-year-old. Her name is Yoevdar Wolde Georges, and by all accounts, a good husband. They have a kid together, but I just do need to mention 27, 15. But it was an arranged marriage.
How old is he? He was 27 at that point?
He was 27, she was 15.
Okay.
It's not great. I'm just saying culture, place, time. It was not.
I mean, there's still places in Africa that do that. So,
his mother married him off, so like, wasn't actively his decision. This is like the one thing I'll say to his defense. But by all accounts, a happy marriage. 1960. Also, if you keep track of the Olympics, we're gonna have an Olympics this year. Coincidentally enough, this Olympics is to take place in Rome. And Abebe is looking pretty good coming in July. He wins his first marathon. The following month in August, he runs another one. And this time he wins, clocking a time of 2 hours and 21 minutes, which would be enough to set the Olympic record if he were to do this in Rome. Based on those two races, they think, okay, he's finally ready, and he is named to the Ethiopian Olympic team to be one of the two marathoners to go over and race in Rome, along with Abebe Bikila.
An abundance of Abebes.
Yeah, Abebe, I like from me reading this, Abebe is like the John of Ethiopia. Like it's an extremely common name. Our Abebe packed light for Rome. He was going to buy some new running shoes when he got over there, which one of the advances we have made with running is we know now you don't want to buy new shoes close to your big race day, because one of the risks that you might run is maybe these shoes don't fit so well. Maybe they give you blisters. And this is exactly what this new pair of shoes did for Abebe. Very quickly realizes, like, I'm not going to make it through a marathon running in these. There's no chance. So he doesn't have a lot of options available, but there is one option available to go back to the oldest form of footwear when running long distances, which is no footwear. And he decides to run the Olympic marathon barefoot. There's extreme heat in Rome on the day of the marathon race, which is the last event of the Olympics. Because of the extreme heat, they hold the event later in the day than usual. It's like a late afternoon, early evening start. The finish is set to be, if people go on the kind of times that they're expecting, not long after sunset. For the first 5 to 20 kilometers, it's bunched up at the top, and Abebe is kind of just lurking in the back, biding his time, waiting to make his move. At that 20-kilometer mark, he does make his move, and he surges to the front, and it's a clear top two at this point, running side by side. It's Abebe and Radi Ben Abdesalam of Morocco. As they draw closer and closer to the finish line, they also pull away further and further from the pack. And as we get to the 40-kilometer mark, they're about 4 or 5 minutes ahead of all the other racers. So it's very clear we're going to have an African winner of the marathon for the first time in the Olympic history. Just a matter of which one it's going to be. But I didn't tee up Roddy Ben Abdesalan at the start of this. I teed up Abebe. With 500 meters to go, they are still neck and neck. And Abebe just decides, fuck it, all-out sprint to the finish line. He surges ahead, and he ends up beating Roddy by a full 25 seconds to become the first African to win the marathon at the Olympics.
A 25-second margin in 500 meters is unreal.
At a certain, I feel like what probably happened is Roddy tried for, the first 100 meters of that to also start sprinting, and then very quickly realized, fuck, this isn't going to happen. Let me just cruise into my silver here. But yeah, even with that being potentially the case, 25 seconds and 500 meters, he ends up stretching out this distance. Not only does he claim gold with that late kick, by just 0.8 of a second, he sets the world record for the marathon race, coming in at 2 hours, 15 minutes, 16 seconds, and 0.2 of a second. 0.8 of a second ahead of Sergei Popov, who finished 5th in this same marathon race. Not only does he set this marathon record, not only does he become the first African to do so, he's doing it again, I need to mention, barefoot. Just his feet and his legs and him running.
Well, to do it in Italy, to do it in this country that represents the history that Ethiopia endured while he was a kid, is storybook.
Of course, yes, exactly. I did have a note about that, and I was going to skip right over it, and I'm glad that you mentioned it. That context also important.
Yeah.
To come into what was once the country that oppressed you and to now claim this incredible victory, not just for Ethiopia, but truly for all of Africa at this point. An incredible achievement. And
someone get Shakira to sing a song about him.
She should. She absolutely should. And obviously, it's no surprise Abebe returns to Ethiopia as a national hero. Haile Selassie, who is the emperor of Ethiopia, and if you don't know about him, if you're a world history buff, just look him up. There's a lot of crazy stuff going on there. But unfortunately, no athletic career to speak of, so we're not going to remember him too much here. But we will mention that he does award to Abebe the Star of Ethiopia. And he also gives him a personal chauffeur who will drive him around in a Volkswagen. Great service to have. But there's still this unrest in Ethiopia. So in December of that same year, he's on a state visit to Brazil. And back home, there's a big old coup attempt. It's somewhat successful, enough so that the new regime arrests Abebe, questions him for a little bit. Eventually, he gets released. Eventually, Haile regains the throne. The coup is not ultimately successful, and he's able to just go back to focus on running again. He continues to be extremely successful in his marathon races. 1961, he runs the marathon in Athens. He wins. Did that one barefoot. That would be the last time that he would go barefoot. He does eventually decide, hey, shoes are pretty good. My feet hurt. Let's put these shoes back on. He goes to Japan and wins a marathon there. He goes to Slovakia and he wins a marathon there. He is undefeated in international marathons. The only marathon that he lost was that first one that he ran after just a year of training for the race. In 1963, he signs up for the Boston Marathon. And through 18 miles, he is on world record pace again. But then those cold Boston winds start kicking in, and he's not quite adjusted to those. So it really knocks him back. He ends up finishing 5th, and this marks the first time that he does not win an international marathon that he competes in.
Ooh, Boston. Boston sucks.
We hate Boston. We don't like cold wind, but we like his fire. And we like the fire that this lit in Abebe ahead of the 1964 Olympics. There's this burning fire in his gut. Oh, God, what is that? Somebody please take me to a hospital. He has to get his appendix removed.
God damn.
Just 40 days before the 1964 Olympic Marathon, which is in Tokyo. with this quick turnaround for recovery, in a matter of days, he's back on his feet. They release him within a week, and he does make it over to Tokyo to attempt to become the first runner in the history of the Olympics to defend the gold in the marathon. This time he steps to the start line with Pumas on his feet, not barefoot. And he has that same kind of strategy that he had in the 1960 Olympics that he kind of always has in these races. He's going to start at the trail of the lead pack, bide his time, see what kind of pace they're going to set. And once he realizes that this is a comfortable pace for him, that's when he's going to kick it up and know that he's going to be able to separate from the pack. By the 15-kilometer mark, he's moved into third. By the 20-kilometer mark, he's taken the lead, and he's very soon starting to stretch out this lead. By the time we hit the 40-kilometer mark, he is clear and away going to win this race again. He's about 3 minutes ahead of the next closest runner. And the only drama was, can he set the world record again? Sure enough, as he races into the Olympic Stadium, the roar of the crowd maybe is what is able to galvanize him. Finishes with a time of 2 hours, 12 minutes, and 11 seconds. Nearly 3 minutes faster than his 1960 race, and a full minute 30 seconds than the most recently established record. He not only defends his gold medal in the marathon at the Olympics, he once again sets the new world record. Gets a hero's welcome once again back in Ethiopia. This time, he doesn't just get a chauffeur service. He gets his own Volkswagen. He's also gifted a house from the monarchy of Ethiopia. And he could easily rest on his laurels at this point. But I think we've proven this dude just fucking loves running. Over the course of the next 4 years, he continues to rack up marathon wins everywhere he goes. And as he enters the 1968 Olympics in Mexico City, with that incredible elevation and with it set to probably be his most difficult marathon yet, he has still only that 1963 Boston Marathon as the blemish on his record. He has remained otherwise undefeated in international competition. Training is going well, but about a week before the race, he has this nagging pain in his left leg that he can't quite figure out what it is. He gets an x-ray, and they discover that he actually has a fracture in his fibula. The doctors obviously advise that he immediately stop training. He does agree. But by the time race day comes along, I'm already here. I got to give it a shot. I got to see if I can dig deep and pull through this. He gets to the 16-kilometer mark. He's still in that lead pack, but the pain becomes too much. He does have to withdraw from the race at this point. And this marks just the second time that Abebe has entered an international marathon and not won it.
16 kilometers of Olympic marathon running on a broken leg.
Unreal. Like, honestly,
with the lead pack, as you said.
With the lead pack, and like, I've broken my fibula, and I can tell you that shit sucks. I tried to play a basketball game like 10 days after breaking it, and like, I think Xavier was there, and he can tell you, it wasn't pretty. It was really bad.
Yeah.
And yet Abebe Bikila is out here still keeping with the elite of the elite, but he's not able to make it that three-peat at the 1968 Olympics. In spite of that, he still, once again for the third time, does get that hero's welcome back in Ethiopia. This time, they don't give him a house, but he is granted the honorific of Shambel, which is effectively a captain in the Ethiopian Imperial Guard. Very similar to being knighted in some more like Western things that we've heard of, but
or being a Kentucky colonel.
Or a Kentucky colonel. It is an incredible honor. In Abebe Bikila's mind, he still wants to compete as a marathoner. This is like it's the Mariano Rivera blowing out his Achilles and not wanting to go out that way. He still has this hunger in him, but we know the archetype of the African runner. We also, unfortunately, know all too well in the running world is the archetype of the runner who has a horrific car accident.
Oh, no. This is what you've been leading to?
The main archetype is...
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you want him to get assassinated by Nazis instead, Xavier?
Well, my archetype was just a false nine, not false nine who then gets assassinated by Nazis. That's just a thing that happened. But Diaz is saying his archetype is champion runner who dies in car accident because that's happened enough times.
That is an archetype within the archetype, and I'm not claiming that he was the first to do that. I'm only claiming that he was the first to win Olympic gold and to set the world record from Africa. But March 22nd, 1969, he's driving his Volkswagen when he loses control and he ends up being pinned underneath the vehicle. He is eventually freed and treated at the hospital, but the crash left him paralyzed from the neck down. He was transferred to a hospital in England where, thanks to intensive physical therapy, he does eventually regain the use of his arms. As soon as he gets the use of his arms back, he immediately starts looking at what kind of competitions is he able to participate in. He settles on archery and table tennis, and he competes at the wheelchair games in London in 1970, which is an early predecessor to what we now know as the Paralympics. He would make his return to the Olympics in 1972 as a guest of honor at the 72 Olympic Games in Munich, where he would receive a standing ovation from the crowd. The gold medalist who won the marathon at that race didn't write his name down. He would attempt to give his gold medal to Abebe, which he very graciously refused and just shook his hand instead. The happy ending is that he did get that standing ovation. The sad ending is that on October 25th of 1973, due to complications from that car accident, Abebe suffers a cerebral hemorrhage and he passes away at the age of 41. Was buried with full military honors, and his state funeral was attended by nearly 65,000 people. So
you beat my funeral. It's all right.
Yeah, eat your heart out, Matthias.
Too many Nazis at that time. The state specifically may have killed him. So,
Right, yeah, state honored versus state murdered you. It makes a little more sense why more people came out for Abebe. But I don't know what it is with these elite racers and getting in these horrific car accidents. Steve Prefontaine, obviously everybody knows about. Kelvin Kiptum, I memorialized previously on this podcast, the current world record holder. I don't know what we got to do, but we got to do something about it, and we need to fucking stop this. And I don't know. Ban all cars, whatever we can do. I don't know if we have the power to ban all cars, though, as this institution.
We can ban all cars from the hall. We can make sure that cars don't kill anyone here.
Right. The car driver can still get in.
Okay, that's what I was going to say. We have some drivers in right now.
The car itself.
Ooh, this does complicate Gravedigger. We may have to revisit that at a later time.
That's fair.
Oh, no.
We can relitigate, but I don't know if we have the power as this institution to ban cars from the road so that we can make sure that these elite runners get to run for as long as they want. But there is one power that I know we have, and that is to do the right thing and to induct Abebe Bikila, the first of the great African marathon runners, into the Hall of Guy.
It's a phenomenal archetype. When you intimated initially that was what was inspiring this category, I had kind of assumed that was roughly what we were going to be talking about in track and field, but I tried very hard to not look into who would fit that. And I am so glad I didn't, so that I could learn now. I really enjoyed that.
Suck a dick, Italy. You can't keep the BB down.
Fuck fascism. Sadly, I don't have anything for that in mind, but it is maybe appropriate that I'm talking about my archetype last today. First, though, we're going to spend a tiny bit more time in the 1930s. We're going to go back somewhere we've been before, which is the very first NFL draft, which was held in Philadelphia at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in 1936. And we've talked about that because the first overall pick, UChicago's Jay Berwanger, famously does not sign with the Philadelphia Eagles, who select them. In fact, he never plays professional football. However, plenty of players do sign as we go through the list, as these 9 teams make selections over 9 rounds. This, of course, terminates with the 81st selection, in which the New York Football Giants take a guard, Phil Flanagan from Holy Cross, who also doesn't sign. Many of the guys who will find themselves in that same position as Phil Flanagan will also not sign. They're often afterthoughts, not necessarily at the top of anyone's board coming that late. But the list piles up as the draft continues and expands along with the NFL. That growth is hitting a major turning point in the 1970s. After 40 years of the NFL's draft era at this time, that list of people like Flanagan taken at the end of a draft, it's gotten pretty long. It's got a lot of things on it. Many people, as I mentioned, who never played, guys who made 1 or 2 appearances, some guys who were journeymen for a while, some who've made Pro Bowls or even All-Star games in other leagues. But something this list doesn't have is a title. That, however, is going to change here in 1976 when we are formally introduced to the NFL's first Mr. Irrelevant, Kelvin Kirk.
Ooh.
Xavier, are we 3 for 3
this.
with unfamiliar individuals?
We are 3 for 3.
There we go, baby.
I do like a Kelvin Kirk coming off of Calvin Kiptum. There's a little Chris Paul George to it.
Here's a quick peek behind the curtain. If you try to search for things about Kelvin Kirk, I don't know if any of you are very familiar with the Star Trek J.J. Abrams films, but the timeline is referred to as the Kelvin timeline, and so it's a little difficult to find early information about Kelvin Kirk. I can confirm some things that I'm absolutely certain about. He's born on New Year's Eve, 1953, in Mount Pleasant, Florida. I am certain of that. I'm not certain of a lot of other early biographical info. I found what I think is a list of his family from a Florida obituary for someone that I am 99% sure is his brother. So I just want to say that caveat before I go into this list. If I'm correct, the family that we are presented with are parents William and Evelyn, and then 8 children altogether, including 2 brothers, one named William Lee and one named Billy. There are some other brothers, but those are the 2 that I was a little perplexed by. This is a big family that Kelvin is born into, and while, again, that is with my supposition that my guess is correct, I have some more confirmed information, which is that family then does move to Dayton, Ohio. And in Dayton, he's going to go attend Dunbar High. Now, this is not the Dunbar High that we have talked about before, with Muggsy Bogues and company, but it is named for the same poet, Paul Laurence Dunbar, who is a Dayton, Ohio native. Once again, I'm presented with difficulty in finding information because this school has been shuttered, and so they do not have many of their athletic records. But I do know, thanks to some old newspaper clippings, that Kirk does get a lot of local honors there in his senior year in 1971. He is what we would refer to as a wide receiver, but they're still being listed as split ends when he is listed as the all-city split end for Dayton. He is listed at 6'0", 173 pounds, but he is a strong dude. I found another blurb from Dayton's Journal-Herald a little bit later in his senior year, when he apparently actually slimmed down to 155 pounds for the wrestling team, at which point he was 12-2. His only 2 losses come against the number 1 and number 2 ranked wrestlers from the previous season. So it's all adding up to a high school career that is more than enough for him to earn a spot at the nearby University of Dayton, which is an independent D1 school at this time. Sits freshman year, and then Kirk takes the field with the Dayton Flyers for the 1973 season for the first time, and quickly tops the depth chart as their number 1 split end. He's leading the team in receiving with 578 yards in 11 games as they go 5-5-1. His production drops a little bit junior year, goes down to 461 yards, still leads the team, because the team is garbage that year as they go 3-8. And then same senior year in terms of leading the team, but thankfully is with some more respectable production, goes all the way up to 637 yards. It is the first time that he leads the team in total yards from scrimmage, and he finishes out his college tenure. He actually finishes out Dayton's D1 tenure as well. Their 5-6 record is the last time they compete in D1 for many decades as they drop down all the way to D3 the next year. They just skip 2 and plummet. But that is unimportant for Kirk. He's done. And so he is now eligible for the 1976 NFL draft. And this is a notable draft for a bunch of different reasons. First off, this draft is taking place like a week after there was an expansion draft. Tampa and Seattle have come into the league, and that's because expansion to 28 teams by the mid-70s had been a major stipulation of the recent AFL-NFL merger that had taken place. We're still very early on in the Super Bowl era at this time. That same year, when they made the agreement for the AFL-NFL merger in 1970, is the same year that a CBA was struck between the NFL and the NFLPA. But just a few years later, we're in this very tumultuous decade, and there's a 1974 strike when that CBA expires. And at the heart of it is the Rozelle. This is a rule that basically allowed the commissioner, if a team lost like a star free agent, to compensate with money, draft picks, even players, you might just get a player taken away and given to someone else if you like sign a free agent. Basically, it is there as a sort of Damocles hanging over the owners' heads if they try and make real free agent contract moves. It is a way to suppress salary and whatnot. The 74 and 75 seasons play continues without the CBA around the strike, and there's some concern with the league that as they're going into this big 76 year where they've just had the expansion draft, they're trying to launch these two new teams, like a draft might not happen if they can't get something together with the players. And in actually a rare legal system W, the courts find in the players' favor. They do eliminate the Rozelle rule, so there's still a lot to be done in the football free agent marketplace, but they are able to hammer out a deal following this, and the draft goes forward with 28 teams picking over 17 rounds. It's the last ever year that they have 17 rounds. They have 12 rounds beginning the next year. And that means, because it's the only year where 28 teams cross over with 17 rounds, this moment, this little Venn diagram, it is going to be the longest draft of all time. It will remain that way throughout NFL history unless we go crazy and start adding rounds again. And after 486 picks, we get to the very last one, which is held by the reigning champions, the Pittsburgh Steelers. They take this selection and they spend it on Kelvin Kirk. And shortly thereafter, Kelvin Kirk gets a phone call. On the other line is a former football player for USC, for some early NFL teams. He'd been drafted also by the Steelers at one point, for some CFL later on. Paul Salata has since moved to LA, his hometown, and just kind of gotten into like, not even movies or TV, just general show business. Like he has some bit cameos, but mostly he's just in like, hey, I'm going to be around and do show business stuff in LA. He saw all of these first round guys getting all this shine year after year after year, and he decided to cook something up for the little guys, for the people at the back of the draft. And so he's asking Kirk to come to California to be celebrated as the NFL's first formal Mr. Irrelevant. He is the one that's going to coin that title. And the plan, which they put into action, is to go all out. The jet's going to touch down in California. There's going to be a crowd to meet Kirk at the airport. They're going to celebrate him as he comes down to get onto like the back of a car for a little motorcade parade. They're going to go to a press conference where he's going to take questions about this. It's at this press conference that Kelvin Kirk arrives. Funny thing about this, Kelvin Kirk's totally on board with it. He loves this. He wants to do it. And multiple members of the Dayton University team, the head coach, the athletic director, the university president, they're all like, yeah, absolutely, Paul Salata. We will get him out there in time. By 10 minutes, he misses his flight. They get this information. They book him the next one. They're like, shit, we can't really, this isn't a big thing. We got a little bit of street closure for this parade, but we do kind of have to stick to a schedule. And so someone that Paul Salata knows just grabs a butcher that looks kind of like Kelvin Kirk. And he has been pretending to be Kelvin Kirk this whole time. But now Kelvin Kirk, as they have this press conference on the courthouse steps, is whisked in. No one's the wiser until they fess up to this many years later. And he just like spends the whole week getting feted, getting celebrated. He is awarded a trophy called the Lozman. Have you guys ever seen this?
I get the Heisman, the Lozman.
Precisely, yes. It is a play on the Heisman. It is a very similar pose, except the player is fumbling the football. It's a good bit. Paul Salata is a creative guy.
I like it.
Yeah. Like, almost more important, I think, than Paul Salata's ideas behind this is the fact that Kelvin Kirk is just such a game dude. This is a quote from Paul's daughter, Melanie, who's going to become very important in all the Mr. Irrelevant proceedings later on in life. If he hadn't embraced this whole idea and really had fun with it once he got out here, the whole thing could have fallen apart before it ever really got going. And I think that's totally true. But the sad thing is, speaking of things getting going, is not Kelvin Kirk's NFL career. He's cut by the Pittsburgh Steelers halfway through training camp. This shouldn't be too surprising. As of this year, of the 89 guys that have been selected with the final pick of the NFL draft, 55 have never played an NFL snap in their lives from that point forward. And I didn't take the time to count all the ones who had like 1, 2, 3, 4 games in their career, but it makes up a bulk of the remaining 34. This is just in line with what the guys in this position have already been doing for years and years, but Kelvin Kirk is codifying it. Kelvin Kirk is setting this mold formally in the precedented states that we know. And he's doing something that a lot of other Mr. Relevance will also do, and that's find career elsewhere, namely up north in Canada. Much like Paul Salada, Kelvin Kirk begins a career in the CFL. He starts in 1977, joining the Toronto Argonauts. Similar to Dayton, he's got about 577 receiving yards, which leads the team. And also similar to Dayton, the team is pretty bad. I was reading this Canadian sports stat site to get some of his stats, and one of the greatest turns of phrase I've ever heard to describe like an anemic football offense was talking about how the Toronto Argonauts labored to change the scoreboard. Just beautifully written.
They don't write sports stories like they used to.
This is just like some dude's blog, man. This is just some blog. Retro Sports Crew, shout outs to you up in Canada for preserving these CFL stats. So like he's receiving, splitting punt return and kick return duties with a lot of guys. Very few teams have just one punt or kick returner. So that's going to kind of be a lot of his CFL career for a little under a decade at this point. As he bounces from a couple teams, he will play with Toronto. He'll play with the Calgary Stampeders, much like his buddy Paul Salada, who he does maintain some connection with. And very often these teams will be bad, as that first one was. But the thing is, you only got at this point 9 teams in the CFL, and 6 of them make the playoffs. So particularly during this run in the late 70s, early 80s, some pretty bad teams make it, particularly because the West is just so much better. The West of the CFL, and they're still sort of not entirely the same league. They're kind of like the AFL, NFL for those first 4 years as they're having a Super Bowl that they come together for, but not necessarily under the same umbrella. The West is just blowing them away. The team that is now known as the Edmonton Elk, previously known as the Edmonton, a racial name that we don't say anymore, but you can also get that kind of pie. They're just like dominating. They have a run of 5 straight championships at this point, and the East just sucks shit. So like some of these teams that make it to the East playoffs are bad, and 81 is one of the best examples, particularly because it centers around our boy Kelvin Kirk. In the East, Hamilton Tiger Cats 11-4, that leads the way. It was perfectly respectable. Sorry, 11-4-1 for Hamilton. Ottawa is 5-11. That's good for second place. Montreal at 3-13.
Let's go Alouettes.
The Alouettes are 3-13. I should point out that over in the West, last place is 6-10. The last place Western team obviously does not make the playoffs and watches 2 different teams with poorer records first square off against one another. Ottawa gets to host the Ottawa Rough Riders, by the way, a playoff game. They host a home playoff game with a 5-11 record as the Montreal Alouettes come to town. They handle them there. That's not a huge upset. But when they go to face the Hamilton Tiger Cats in Hamilton after the bye, they shock them to make it to, brace yourselves for this, the 69th Grey Cup.
Oh, very nice.
Very nice.
Incredibly nice. So we got this 5-11 Ottawa team in the 69th Grey Cup. And through the first half, they are up 20-1. The only point that the Edmonton team, which by the way is led by Warren Moon, they've only been able to get that single rouge. Unfortunately, for at least Kelvin Kirk here, they come out guns blazing in the second half. They outscore them 25-3 during that time. There is one play later on that GM Holtby will look back on in the second half during a really pivotal time. They still have the lead at this point. They're trying to drive to pad that out a little bit. Kirk had been remarked upon often in the league as being one of the faster players, and this time he's almost too fast for an underthrow by J.C. Watts that GM Don Holtby just really looks back as like the turning point of the game. If only Watts could have got a little more mustard on that for Kirk, he was free and clear for a score. But Edmonton wins. This is part of that 5 championship win streak. And even though they win, the league is still so mad about 5-11 Ottawa making it that they completely, like, first off, merge the leagues together finally to say, no, fuck this. We're coming together. We're going to set up a new rule where, I'm sorry, a 3-13 team is not making the fucking playoffs. This Ottawa team's Cinderella run, like, reshapes the structure of Canadian football as we know it. And it is a restructuring that Kirk's around to see for a little bit longer. He stays in Ottawa for 2 more years, but then he does finally retire after that 1983 season.
James, I do have to make sure our listeners know that an American team has still won, a Canadian team has won the NHL Stanley Cup. And that has to be reminded every year until that is no longer true.
Yeah, go Stallions. I mean, go Baltimore Stallions. We love them,
go
baby.
Baltimore Stallions.
For a long time, one thing that people had remarked about Kelvin Kirk, other than his speed, was he was really good at doodling. He'd just be doing doodles in the locker room all the time, putting little drawings on like people's play sheets, their prep folders, just sprinkling those about. And this ends up being kind of what he pursues in retirement. He becomes an artist for a local newspaper, the Ottawa Citizen, and just continues along with that for a while. But I want to also point out that while he's doing that, the idea of Mr. Irrelevant is also plodding along at a remarkable pace. Within just 2 years, it has become so crazy the PR that teams are able to get. It is so desired to have the PR for the Mr. Irrelevant that in 1978, the Steelers, once again, defending champions, have the last pick. The Rams have the second to last. And what ends up happening is the Rams are like, oh, no, after you. We couldn't possibly, Steelers, do the same in kind. This goes back and forth, some like stupid Midwestern polite off, because they both just want to make the final pick. They eventually have to like come in and say, no, you just go in order. This is called the Salata rule that the NFL installs after this. And Salata is actually involved in the announcement of this pick for years and years and years, for a long time, as Mr. Irrelevant becomes more of a NFL-associated thing. Up until his death in his 90s, he is making that final pick announcement every single year, and that's been taken over by his daughter Melanie, who we mentioned earlier. She also manages all of the festivities as well, which he had continued to do throughout all those years. And it's gotten bigger and bigger, but something that I really appreciate about the Mr. Irrelevant celebration is it is not a one-size-fits-all. Melanie makes that call that people have been receiving ever since Kelvin Kirk got that call from Paul Salata every year to reach out to them and find out first, how can we get as many people here for you as possible? We had one Tongan player that required, I believe, 63 people to have sleeping accommodations in the city of Los Angeles while they were arranging this. They will take them to particular sites that they want to see in the Los Angeles area. They'll incorporate whatever foods they want to eat, whatever celebrations they want to have. They will tailor it to the player. And as Salata would say for many years, it started off tongue-in-cheek and still is in many ways. But the truth is there are a lot more people at the bottom than the top. And I like that. I like that he made the conscious effort to keep that in mind for all of us by creating this. Maybe like we're reaching a point where Mr. Irrelevant is going to be stranger as we have a like landscape where undrafted free agents more often make up rosters, where we have people that like are so good at scouting that these later picks, if you look at the chart of like the number of career appearances that these irrelevant guys get, it has skyrocketed over the last few years relatively, with the apotheosis of Mr. Irrelevant, which is Mr. Relevant, Brock Purdy. Like, I know we're not necessarily Niners fans, so we got to give him his due. Like, it is really the culmination of this Mr. Irrelevant thing for years that there is now. Should he be an MVP candidate? No. Was he an MVP candidate for much of the year? Yeah, and there's no denying that.
The most upsetting thing of this 49ers run last year, not even them beating the shit out of the Eagles, it was having to admit Brock Purdy is actually good, and if he was healthy for the NFC Championship, it would have been a different game. Not that the Eagles would have lost. I still think they would have won. But it would have been a much more competitive game.
Yeah. You simply do have to hand it to him. He is the culmination, as I said, like the final evolution in many ways of this. That's undeniable, but I also think a very undeniable thing is that Kelvin Kirk was a perfect first Mr. Irrelevant to begin this long lineage. His story does have a final chapter that I've been avoiding getting to. Ball is life. We all know this. Unfortunately, in 2003, Kirk finds out that ball can also be death. He is playing a game of pickup when he suffers a heart attack and is tragically dead at 49. Though when I wrote this, I didn't know that was going to be the longest that any of these three guys lived.
He was the oldest of the three, James.
The elder statesman.
The elder statesman dying at the ripe old age of 49. It is tragic, but he lives on through scholarship funds in his name, and he lives on in that Mr. Irrelevant lineage, much like the Salata said. It took someone like Kelvin Kirk leaning into it and accepting the role and archetype that was being thrust upon him and really relishing it to create it. And that is why Kelvin Kirk is my guy this week.
No, it definitely takes the right attitude because, like, I'm trying to imagine. We can go to last week. Xavier McDaniel would not have enjoyed the pomp and circumstance around being Mr. Irrelevant. That would not have been the right person for it.
I think there is something to be said for, like, you're always dealing with larger just pools of players that are available to be drafted and players that will, go into the league, even if it's smaller percentages. Look, after 486 people, there was still one name on the Steelers list. They're like, yeah, we do want this guy. We do want to have exclusivity to this guy, even if we're going to cut him in training camp, even if he's never going to win a title in any North American country. We want Kelvin Kirk. Mr. Irrelevant is not discarded. It is a thing that I enjoy about the draft very much every year, and I'm glad that Kelvin Kirk was there to kind of help usher that tradition in.
I can't get over trying to take a Paul Salada's headspace here, where he was not a Mr. Irrelevant who wanted other Mr. Irrelevants. He was just a dude.
Yeah, he was like a 10th rounder. Like, he wasn't high stock. And again, I don't think he even plays with that Steelers team that drafts him, much like Kelvin Kirk. But yeah, this is just something that he saw a disparity and he would for years like try to make sure Mr. Irrelevant was as celebrated as the guys up at the top. Like when he saw a first round pick get a $5,000 watch, he made sure that year the prize pack for Mr. Irrelevant included the same $5,000 watch.
I mean, that's probably more than Mr. Irrelevant was getting on his signing bonus.
I mean, if we're talking about money, it should be mentioned that Mr. Irrelevant has also become a major charity drive, source of donated funds to a lot of organizations in that Southern California area, or other ones if the Mr. Irrelevant speak up and say that they want something else to be included in that, because again, they try to make it's with the three archetypes that we have today. If I may get into some larger discussions, I think what appeals to me about the Mr. Irrelevant one is it is a very specific thing. And even as something that existed for many years before him, I think Kelvin Kirk represents it the best because of the formalization of it all. But in all of the years since then, it still allows for so much fluidity. You've got guys that have made Pro Bowls. You've got guys that have made All-Star games. You've got guys that have, won Super Bowls with Ryan Suckup and guys that have made Super Bowls with Brock Purdy. So there's so much room still for a beautiful variety, even while sticking to this archetype. So I think it was the archetype itself for Kelvin Kirk, not to mention the excellent story that I then discovered that really pulled me in.
Right time, right place. That's all it takes sometimes, right? We have a good field this time. I do love Matthias, basically just being the symbol of the Austrian resistance in many ways. And, we have, obviously, with my story as well, we have some pretty interesting geopolitical connections to Abebe Bikila's most significant triumph.
I will apologize on Kelvin Kirk's behalf that he is not formally Antifa. We don't know that for certain.
And he didn't fight Italy.
I'm just leaving the door open.
The absence of evidence.
Again, we've said how difficult it was for me to find biological information. He very well could have fought Italy, Xavier. There's a lot of holes. Much as we often do, I think we've, again, kind of gone in three very different directions with this. We've gone with, an archetype that reflects actual in-game positional strategy. We've gone with an archetype that is just kind of a loose grouping that we think about things with African marathon runners that is also just kind of a byproduct of people's geographic origins and their training. And then we've got a very formalized title that doesn't link together guys with anything other than a decision made by other people about those guys. So I guess which of those feels most like an archetype to us? Is that where we begin?
I guess if we want to talk about archetype, to me, you kind of said it. Mr. Irrelevant is a title. I view it as more than an archetype. You don't think what are the common characteristics that an archetype typically? What are the characteristics that unite all of these players? And I mean, yeah, to your point, it is that they were all drafted last, but that's not that's more of like a thing that happened to you than like a characteristic of you, I guess, would be my point.
Absolutely. I would say the fact that it is a title that, like, should you have a career, even if it's not necessarily in the NFL, like, it's a title that follows you and does affect perception of you. Like, we talk about Brock Purdy's status as Mr. Irrelevant every time we talk about Brock Purdy. It is the defining characteristic of the Brock Purdy discourse. And I do think, I'm not necessarily, like, I think that I can be swayed away from Kelvin Kirk, but I don't think that Mr. Irrelevant isn't necessarily an archetype, because I think if we're using a category to refract our narratives about a particular player, I think it's valid to be an archetype category. If you want to throw out Kelvin Kirk because, like, I love this guy but couldn't find that much information about him because he never played a snap of NFL ball and was on some pretty shitty CFL teams, like, I'm here for it. I just don't want to disqualify my boy.
Diaz, I have a quick question for you. How many Mr. Irrelevants of the last 10 years not named Brock Purdy can you name?
Probably none of them.
Okay.
I don't think I could.
How many false nines can you name?
A pretty good amount, to be honest.
I'm looking to Diaz because we're asking Diaz, and this is the day. Xavier, I have no doubt that you can name a bunch of false nines. You are an encyclopedia about soccer.
I mean, like, I understand it, like, conceptually, obviously, but, like, the outright name, like, yeah, like, Messi definitely played as a false nine. Arjen Robben feels like a guy that was probably a little bit of a false nine.
Yeah.
Have him live, even distribute.
Okay.
I can recognize it. It's it goes back to our very definition of guy. I don't know how to define it, but I know it when I see it.
That's fair.
And I try to lean on, whenever there's a category that is like this where we all have different interpretations, I try to lean on the thoughts of the person whose idea it was, even if it's not the exact way I took it. So that's why I really wanted Diaz's opinion on archetype. And I do see, like, it's definitely not disqualifying, but I do see the distinction between title and archetype, where it's like, yes, Brock Purdy, because of his position as Mr. Irrelevant, gets a lot of press. But just being Mr. Irrelevant, that's the really only thing that ties a lot of these people together, and not like the way they play or like physical characteristics or anything. Like false nines are all going to be of a very similar type. Same like Diaz with the African runners who get in car accidents.
Let's be very clear. The
That's
car
not the one
accident is like a sad additional thing. I'm not saying that he established that archetype. He just established the archetype of training at altitude in Africa and being insane at distance running. That's the only one I'm saying.
Yeah, so we obviously, the African distance runner is like a very common thing now, that it, is people with similar abilities and like a similar style of how they do things, which fits my like feeling of archetype. So like, again, it's not disqualifying of Kelvin, but I think I'm leaning towards the other two right now with just my thoughts on what Diaz was saying about like what he was really going for.
If I got no shot at Kelvin Kirk, I'm pretty heavily behind Abebe.
That's fine. You both know that I will not, as much as I like Matthias Sindelar and think it's a great story, I'm not greedy. I'm not going to keep us here for longer just to push for a third week in a row. It's not the kind of person I am. I think we could be safe in this one.
Two other things before we get into formalities, if we're getting there. But just two other things that I wanted to mention. First, like around the BB, but then also about him specifically. Like, his emergence is really the reason why, even for runners who aren't from Africa, like almost any elite long distance runner is going to do some of their training in elevation in Africa now, or at least in elevation generally. Just because like the benefits are so clearly demonstrated now as a result of his run.
It's the kind of like overall changing of a sport landscape that the wave of Japanese competitive eaters represented by Kobayashi in the hot dog scene.
Right, or like I can go to like I follow like Zelda speed running, and you do it
Every
certain
time
way
there's like
for
a
long
new
time, and then somebody discovers a new glitch, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh shit, this actually saves 10 minutes here, and now the whole way you do it is different now. So like yeah, similar in that kind of way where it's like a significant leap is made by this discovery. But then just the thing I want to mention about him as a competitor. Obviously, with his racing style, the way I kind of describe it, he trails behind the pack, realizes that that's the pace they're going to set, and then just goes faster. He was like very notably never tired at the end of a marathon. Would continue to do like high knees to like keep the blood flowing after he got finished, stretch it out, and always said like I had at least another 6 to 10 kilometers in me if I had to do it.
Okay, to be fair, man, you know the exact length of the race. It's very formalized. You
Right,
don't
right,
need to have
of
6 to 10 ready.
Of course. But I mean, in theory, we never saw the fastest that he could run a marathon because he never had an appropriate challenger that would bring that out of him. Like the one time he did, the guy made it to the final 500 meters with him and then still lost by 25 seconds. So just incredible dominance that he brought to that sport. And again, he was just a guy that was in the Imperial Guard and liked to run a lot. It wasn't like he came up trained like a lot of truly super successful runners we see now. So we never really got to see probably the best of Abebe. And I think that's a good what if to add to his story.
Indeed, and I think you have done your best for Abebe's sake. I'll go ahead and say I don't think we need 25 more seconds to hash this out.
Look, we're not going to stretch it out. We're not going to take a victory lap. We're just going to say very succinctly and directly, Abebe Bikila is the reason for the watershed of elite African runners that we have seen coming into the distance running space. And if it were within this hall's powers, we would ban all vehicles to ensure that we get to see the fully realized careers of these great athletes. But if we cannot do that, we can at least honor their forefather, their archetype founder, and welcome in to the Hall of Guy, Abebe Bikila.
Welcome in, Abebe. We are very proud to have this car-free infrastructure for you. And we're very happy to have had all of you join us in this momentous day for pedestrians and for Abebe Bikila. This momentous day, of course, was made possible by a few folks, including producer Craig, all the coders behind him, and then our musical director, whom we thank for that lovely theme music. But it is you, dear listener, that we, as always, want to thank the most of all, because we do it for y'all. And I hope that little finger click came through on the audio. One thing that I'm sure can come through now are any final notes that we all might have?
Nothing from me.
Congratulations to the 2024 NBA champion Boston Celtics.
Not so fast, midget! Not so fast!
We will see what sound effects are done with that. We will, as I mentioned, as we record this, Xavier's preparing to leave for Japan, so we will have something for you ready next week. If you want to find out what ahead of time, maybe we'll let you know. If you visit all of our information at bit.ly/rememberthatguy, all one word, all lowercase. I have been one of your hosts, James.
I've been the very special guest, Xavier.
And I'm Diaz, and it's like they always say, what's good for the guy is good for the gander.
Gaianara.
Oh my God, Buster only got hacked on Twitter.
Yeah. You want to buy some $sign Buster?
This is so funny. The Philadelphia Phillies and Chicago White Sox are finalizing a deal that will send star outfielder Luis Robert Jr. to Philadelphia. The New York Mets are finalizing a deal that will send Francisco Lindor to the Oakland Athletics. Shohei Ohtani's been banned for life from the MLB.
Lindor to the Athletics would be an incredible, just like it's hard to wrap your head around something that absurd. Like honestly, that's what I would say. That's where the account goes too far. The Phillies making a trade for Luis Robert, plausible. John Fisher improving the Oakland Athletics. I'm sorry.
That's the one real
John
tweet
Fisher
that real Buster tweeted that one out and was like confused at why it got so much traction, and then found out that all the other tweets came out. But wait, Diaz, before you get started, you dropped the bomb in the soccer group chat today that you did not elaborate on, and you did not text me about.
I mean, looking to buy the ring is not proposing. It's a very different thing.
I was just looking to buy the ring, man.
I'm just looking to buy the ring. I don't think it's a big fucking deal. Like I said, it's like the earliest form of like a rumor. You know what I mean? It's like
The Phillies are in talks
Hey,
about
hey.
potentially acquiring.